All right, great to be back with you guys. It's the Part-Time Trader, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at the altcoin market and trying to answer the question that has been on everybody's lips for what probably feels like an eternity. Are we on the brink of alt season? Or, in fact, are altcoin holders in for much more pain over the next couple of years? Well, to help answer that question, I will be taking a deep dive into the world of technical analysis using some really interesting charts to plot out what I think the markets hold for crypto holders over the next 1 to 2 years. If that sounds interesting, stay tuned, hit the subscribe button and smash like. Help me grow the channel and I can bring you more content like this on a regular basis. Before we kick into it, just a standard reminder that none of this is financial advice. These charts and these videos are purely for entertainment and information purposes, but if you find them useful, then like I say, please do hit subscribe and it would be great to have you with me on a regular basis. Okay, right, let's kick off with this chart. So this is the crypto market cap dominance excluding the top 10 coins in the market. So this is effectively everything outside of the really big coins, the Bitcoins, Ethereum, Solanas, etc. And this chart helps us, I suppose, to gauge the relative strength of lower cap altcoins. And what we've seen, and this is really clear from this chart, is that since the peak of the market back in late 2021, when altcoins went absolutely ballistic for about a year, what we've seen is a very slow and drawn out decline in the dominance of altcoins versus the rest of the market. So clearly for quite some time, Bitcoin was top dog and has dominated the crypto market for the last sort of 2 years. More recently, you've had some of the large caps like Ethereum perform really, really well. But the small caps, those that sit outside of the top 10 coins, just seem to be grinding lower and lower. And unfortunately, this chart doesn't really give me much hope that that trend is about to reverse. And when I look at this chart, there are a few things that stand out to me. The first is that this trend line here, so everybody for a while back here were seeing this as some sort of symmetrical pennant, symmetrical triangle that would break to the upside and drive altcoins much higher. In fact, the breakout led pretty shortly after to the top of the altcoin market back in 2021, and since then dominance has come back nowhere near the kind of levels that we saw during the peak of that bull market. And like I say, the fact that this trend line has been so dominant for so long, first holding as resistance for quite some time and then being flipped into support, and again here you can see that the levels on this line mark really significant levels all the way through to August, September this year, so just the last couple of months. And from my perspective, the fact that we've broken back under this trend line, having held it as support for such a long period of time, bar this small deviation here, tells me that potentially the market is heading much lower, and that, well, at least altcoin dominance is heading much lower, and that altcoins are probably going to suffer. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that they go down in USD terms, but certainly relative to the strength that we've seen in Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana, it potentially tells me that those large caps are going to continue to dominate. Now, for my overarching view on the crypto market, you need to go back and watch some of my previous videos, because my view on Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is topping out here and is about to enter into a multi-year bear market that will take it back to prices that most people cannot even begin to imagine. If you're interested in my view on Bitcoin, then please head back to the last video that I uploaded, I think it was last week, where I lay out the reasons why I think Bitcoin is about to correct much harder than most people can even begin to get their heads around. And given that, you know, I guess there's two options for the altcoin market. The first is that we're at the tail end of a cycle and Bitcoin is flattening out and altcoins begin to run. And I've given you here two triggers that I will be looking for if we start to see some upside on altcoins. And so if the dominance of other cryptocurrencies outside of the top 10 begins to flip this key level here, this downward sloping trend line, and that starts to hold as support again, that will be for me the first sign that maybe altcoins are beginning to strengthen versus Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the other big cap crypto projects. And certainly the second sign, which I think would be absolutely massive for altcoin bulls, would be a break of this downtrend here, which, as you can see, has held really cleanly since the top of the crypto market in late 2021. This downtrend has held as resistance 3 times. If it were to break to the upside and we were to start getting holds above this downtrend on the weekly chart, then I could see the altcoin market driving much higher. But I think buying in here is a really, really risky strategy, because clearly there is no sign of strength yet in the market. We are consistently getting lower highs and lower lows, and when you add that to the fact that this trend line here has been lost as support and has been back tested multiple times now as resistance, I think what's likely to happen is that we see the kind of price action that I've laid out here in the red path, where unfortunately for altcoin bulls, dominance of the altcoin market continues to just grind lower and lower over the next couple of years. And there are other charts that point to something similar. So I was beginning to think, let me just tidy this chart up a little bit. I was beginning to think recently that this here could be some sort of macro falling wedge for altcoins, and this is the dominance of others versus BTC. So essentially, this is actually the others market cap divided by BTC. So what this does is monitor the strength of altcoins, low cap altcoins versus Bitcoin, which is obviously the king of the market and the crypto that everybody watches as a sign of strength. And again, as you can see, Bitcoin has been on an absolute tear over the last couple of years, and even since the bottom of the 2022 correction, we have seen altcoins continue to underperform Bitcoin consistently. Now, recently, I was considering whether this was a sort of macro falling wedge that could break to the upside, and I still think that's a possibility. However, a couple of things concern me. One is that this level here seems really key. So what you've got is resistance, support, resistance, a small deviation here before price headed much lower, and then you've got support again here. The fact that we are back under this resistance level here and price is back testing that level as resistance, I think that is a bad sign. So, you know, having held the support here and having flipped that level back in 2021, the fact that we're now under what looks like a really, really key level tells me that potentially Bitcoin is going to continue to dominate altcoins for some time to come. And my overall market thesis is that Bitcoin bottoms at some point in 2027, and that altcoins actually come back far stronger than Bitcoin does from that bottom. So what could that look like? Well, I suppose the key question in my mind is this lower boundary about to hold? Interestingly, there is another way of looking at this chart, which is that the entire thing, instead of being a falling wedge, could be some sort of falling channel with price set to come back in and retest this level. And what would make me really bullish is if we took out these lows at this next level and began to head back up towards the top of this falling channel. And I think there are a few reasons why that is likely. One, Bitcoin looks like it's at macro resistance now, and I believe is about to show significant weakness over the coming months. Now, it could take a while for Bitcoin to finally roll over, and we've seen it's largely gone sideways for probably the best part of a year now. That's one reason. The second is that the moment we have broken under this key support and resistance level here, I think that opens up the possibility of us going and taking out some of these lows down here. So I would love to see, if I was to get bullish on altcoins, I'd love to see these lows here get taken out by a move down into the bottom boundary of this falling channel. And ultimately, a reclaim of this level here, I think, would make me extremely bullish on altcoins. But like I say, I don't see that happening until probably early to mid 2027 at the earliest. So again, you know, coming down into this region, possibly mid 2027, taking out all of these lows here, everybody gets bearish, and then we head back up towards this upper boundary of this channel. And if that happens, guys, then honestly, I think from 2027 onwards, I see huge potential in the altcoin market. But right now, the only way I could flip bullish on altcoins is if we start to see dominance break out of this downtrend and hold on a weekly basis and potentially reclaim this support and resistance zone here. So again, nothing to get excited about in the altcoin market, in my view. I know every single week people will tell you we're on the brink of alt season, and to put that into context, we've only really seen 2 alt seasons in the entire history of the crypto market, and the first was in 2017 when you got this incredibly strong performance of altcoins versus Bitcoin. And for about a year, give or take, altcoins were the #1 way to make money in the entire world. And we saw a similar period of outperformance where, again, some altcoins were delivering incredible life-changing returns. But again, it was a really small window. So it was from January 2021 into probably the spring or late 2021, where the market topped out in January 2022. And so you're talking about a year here where altcoins perform really strongly and a year here where altcoins perform really strongly. Other than those 2 periods, altcoins tend to trend down versus Bitcoin. And that is what we've seen now for 3.5, almost 4 years since the market topped out in January 2022. So for me, absolutely nothing to get excited about on the altcoin front at the moment. And despite the fact that everybody is continuously calling for alt season, unless we break this downtrend up here on others divided by BTC, then I can see zero reason to think that altcoins are about to go on a huge tear. And again, just to point out the similarities in the chart, so the last one was the others market cap divided by BTC market cap, divided by BTC. This is others dominance, so the rate at which the small cap altcoins dominate the crypto market in percentage terms, divided by Bitcoin dominance, so the percentage of the overall crypto market that BTC takes up. And again, you can just see this really clear downtrend. I love this pattern on a higher time frame, and I think when it eventually breaks, it's going to be incredibly bullish for altcoins. But I just look at these lows here and this level, and I would love to see a retest and potentially a take of this level and a reclaim before we start moving back up. Now, if I'm wrong, and if altcoins do start to show strength, then clearly a break of this downtrend and a hold on the weekly above that level would be a great entry marked by this green arrow to go long and to throw everything I have at the altcoin market. But until we get there, again, just looks like a downtrend, looks like a series of lower highs and lower lows. And to be quite honest with you, I want absolutely nothing to do with this market right now. So either we're going to see a break to the upside, or we're going to see a retest of the lower boundary, and potentially we're going to take out these lows here and this key support level before reclaiming it and going much higher. Now, I covered this on the last video. This is stablecoin dominance. So this is USDC dominance plus USDT dominance. So the 2 major stablecoins in the space. And again, when I'm trying to piece together what is the market doing at the moment, and are we on the brink of a period of massive altcoin outperformance, this is a chart that I love to look at because it gives me so many clues. So first of all, right, no reason to be super bearish on altcoins right now, because stablecoin dominance has been rejected from this downtrend one more time. And it's definitely possible that stablecoin dominance heads back to these lows before coming back up and potentially taking out the downtrend and heading much higher. And I'm open-minded about that as a possibility. I suppose if you were really bullish, you'd say potentially it comes down and retests the lower boundary of this falling wedge before heading higher, in which case I think altcoins probably would go absolutely ballistic during that fall in stablecoin dominance. But I'm skeptical about whether either of those things happen. The reason being that we have been in this 2-year accumulation zone where price has largely gone sideways. You know, the lows have been marked here at the bottom boundary of this range, and the highs have been marked up here at the upper boundary of this range. This to me just looks like it's reaccumulating and potentially putting in a macro higher low before price breaks out and breaks this downtrend. So this could mess around for another few weeks, potentially even a few months before breaking higher, but eventually I expect this downtrend to be broken, and we've hit it 1, 2, 3 times, 4 times now. I think on the 5th time of asking, this is going to give way. Stables are going to go much higher in dominance terms relative to the rest of the market, and that probably marks the top for Bitcoin and the period of continued dire performance in the altcoin market. So look, I'm just telling you, zero emotion involved, what the charts are telling me right now. Like I say, until this level breaks, there's no reason to be too bearish on altcoins. But the fact that we are continually coming back to this downtrend and it's acting like a magnet for price, I think eventually it will break. That may be in another 3-6 months time, but I don't expect altcoins to go parabolic during that period of consolidation before we break to the upside. If I'm wrong, and if the lows start to break here and we start to get breakouts on others dominance versus BTC, or on others dominance full stop, then clearly I will reassess my strategy and I'll update you guys with another video. I wanted to take a quick look at some of the most popular altcoins in the market before we go any further. And the first one I wanted to talk you through was Solana, because it seems like a long time ago now, but in the early stages of this recent bull market, if you want to call it that, from sort of summer 2023, we just saw Solana just tear to the upside and deliver phenomenal gains in a relatively short space of time. I think in a period of about 6 months, it went from $18 to $200, so 10x returns for investors that were lucky enough to be smart and buying down here. But since then, price has completely flattened out, and there's a few things that I wanted to point out on this chart. And again, those of you who have been following me for a while will know that I'm extremely bearish on Solana, and these are the reasons why. First of all, this all-time high held as resistance here. We broke through it back in early this year, in January 2025. We swiped the all-time high, but we were not able to hold above it. Second of all, this uptrend here always looked to me like an unstable foundation for price to be heading higher from. And what's happened is that we've broken this uptrend on the weekly, and price has painted this sort of rising wedge pattern back into the sort of region of all-time highs. And I flagged a couple of months ago now, back here in early September, I flagged that I expected a throw over on this rising wedge, which is where price appears to break out to the upside, but then gets rejected and heads back into the wedge before breaking it and heading lower. And so far, I haven't touched this squiggly line since the beginning of September. That's exactly what price has done. We've headed up. We've delivered this throw over. Everybody got bullish about the breakout here. It looked like, you know, for most people, it looked like Solana was heading much higher. And I was one of very few people that were cautious here. Price has broken back under the lower boundary of this rising wedge. And to me, if you use Solana as a key indicator of overall market health, it doesn't look good right now. And so this is another reason why I'm struggling to see a case for alt season in the short term, because surely if alt season were about to arrive, you would be seeing strength in some of these large cap altcoins. And that is just not what we're seeing at the moment. And the Solana BTC chart looks even worse in my view. Like I say, you had this big sort of broadening descending wedge in the 2022 correction, a breakout, a retest of support in September 2023 before Solana went up 300% versus Bitcoin during this period and delivered close to a 10x in a 6-month period in USD terms. But what happened then after that period of massive outperformance versus the rest of the market is that Solana went sideways for an entire year. And during this period, everybody was saying this was reaccumulation before we head higher. I was one of very few people who were pointing out that this looks like distribution and probably a major top for Solana, which probably also marks a major top for the overall market, particularly the altcoin market. And yep, lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Solana has underperformed Bitcoin for the entirety of this year, basically making lower lows, and again on a macro scale another sort of first major lower high following this period of distribution back here. And again, this reclaim of this key level, this range low here, looks like it failed. And at that point back in September, I painted this blue squiggle pointing out that I really believe that this is going much lower versus Bitcoin. And if it does, it's hard to see how the altcoin market can thrive and outperform Bitcoin in a world where Solana just looks so weak versus Bitcoin. I mean, there is nothing in my view to be bearish, to be bullish about here. If you zoom out and you look at this on a kind of 2-week chart, you can see that this period of distribution here looks like the first macro lower high for Solana versus Bitcoin. This looks like the second, and I suspect at some point we are going to come right back in to retest this key support and resistance zone here, which is a long way off. And when you bear in mind that I can see a 90% plus correction coming for Bitcoin when stocks and the Nasdaq eventually begin to roll over, which in fairness may take a while before it happens, then boy oh boy, you know, if BTC goes through an epic correction and Solana corrects versus BTC, I honestly think there's a case for Solana going all the way back to at least $8, these sort of 2022 lows down here, potentially going much lower. And I don't know whether all of these altcoins are going to come back from the kind of obliteration that I expect we're going to see over the next couple of years. Now, one of the altcoins that I do think will bounce back really strongly is Avax, and this is Avax versus Bitcoin. I do not see a reason for Avax to go up dramatically in the short term. I think this is the Avax versus Bitcoin chart, and as you can see, we've lost a really key support and resistance level. We've back tested it as resistance, which is what I pointed for here back in, I don't know why all my lines have disappeared, which is what I pointed to here back in July, August, and lo and behold, we've come up, we've retested that level, and it has held as resistance. So unless we get a reclaim of this key support and resistance level, I see no reason to think that Avax is going to outperform Bitcoin. And in fact, when I look at this macro pattern, which to me looks like a giant descending broadening wedge, I think it's probably the case that we're going to see another couple of years of underperformance, and then eventually a bottom where we come in and take out all of these lows here properly. You can see even with the scam wick that we saw a couple of weeks back, we didn't take out this level. I think if we do that and then we reclaim them as support, we head back up to the upper boundary of this descending broadening wedge, which marries up with what I see happening in the others market relative to Bitcoin. Avax looks like a similar chart pattern. I think 2027 will give me life-changing buying opportunities. Now, you need to do what you want with your own capital. None of this is financial advice, but the way I'm looking at the market right now is that I think we've still got another 18 to 24 months of altcoin underperformance. But when the market eventually bottoms, and just look at the size of some of these moves, because this wedge, which is multi-year, if we did genuinely come down to this level and then head back up to the previous all-time high, you're talking about Avax potentially doing a 50x, and that is a 50x versus Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin is going up in the same period, I think Avax is one of the altcoins that is top of my list to buy in 2027, but I am going absolutely nowhere near it right now. So capital preservation and potentially achieving some gains in the traditional finance market, the TradFi market, looking at equities, and in particular stocks listed on the NASDAQ, and the AI boom and how I can capitalize on that to build my capital before rotating back into crypto and altcoins in 2027. That's how I'm playing the market. I'll wrap up with a couple of altcoin charts. First is Dogecoin. I've been bullish on Dogecoin for quite a while. I flipped bullish on Dogecoin back in the early part of the summer this year because I could see that this looked like a descending broadening wedge and we were going to break to the upside, and potentially, in my view, I thought we would come back up and take out the previous all-time high, which is what a lot of coins have done. And I'm not, like if you think about what happened with XRP, it had a really swift move, having gone sideways for a really long time, and just completely took out the previous high, the 2021 high. I was expecting something like that for Doge. I'm not completely ruling it out, but strength in the market after this breakout back in July just hasn't looked great. And I've hit a couple of longs during this period. I longed the retest here and took profit up here. But since then, I've just resisted the temptation to get back into Doge in a big way. I had a spot bag that I closed out following this massive scam wick. I just think there's so much risk in the crypto market now. And if stablecoin dominance starts to turn up, as I think it will, then some of these will not look good in hindsight. And another thing that gives me some worry is that a lot of these altcoins seem to be painting similar patterns. So what you get is this trend line here that holds and supports price. And lots of people are looking for $1, $2, thinking it's going to go to the upper boundary. Generally, when everybody's charting the same pattern and calling for the same price levels, it rarely happens. And if I look at something like Velo, it worries me that actually these uptrends that have held price going back to the lows of late 2022, early 2023, potentially look like they're on the brink of giving way. And a similar move for Doge would see this support line here give way and price eventually head back to some of these lows here before, I think, maybe going much, much lower. So I'm not overly bearish on Doge. I think at the moment, price action looks okay. This trendline support is still holding. Would it surprise me massively if we saw some strength come into the market and for us to head back to the all-time high? No. But equally, given the state of the overall market, given what some of these altcoin charts look like, I'm just not banking on it. And I think there's much, much better risk return available in traditional markets. And in particular, the NASDAQ looks extremely productive right now if you're a bull. So some of these look like absolute garbage. Velo is a great example. And I think eventually this one is destined to come in and take out these lows, potentially go even further down. Just look at the size of this huge rising wedge. I did expect a couple of months back for price to push higher and potentially come back into this zone here. That hasn't happened, and you've got to follow price action. For me, could this chop around for another 3 to 6 months before heading lower? Could we come back up and rally 100% over the next few weeks? Of course we could, and I think everybody would get massively excited. But I think on a macro scale, when you zoom out enough, this looks dreadful. And there are lots of alts that look like this, and it's why I'm worried that eventually Doge could do something similar and this uptrend here starts to break down and price heads much, much lower. So again, just to recap, not overly bearish on Doge right now, but let's keep watching. If this uptrend gives way on the weekly, then it really doesn't look good. One of the altcoins that does look a little better than some of these charts at the moment, in my view, is ADA. And I've been flagging this pattern for weeks. Again, a bit like Doge, back in the summer, we broke out from this descending broadening wedge. This is the second time that we've retested the upper boundary of that wedge as support, and it's holding. And despite everything that has happened over the last couple of weeks in the market, this seems to be holding a higher low. The fact that price is consolidating above this support line tells me that potentially we're about to head higher. And who knows, would it surprise me massively if we got some sort of really dramatic push higher? We took out the all-time high and then we headed back inside this big rising wedge before going lower. That would not surprise me at all. And so I quite like, from a risk and return perspective, I quite like the thought of going long here. I am cautious about doing that just because of the state of the overall market. But if there were one coin that I was looking to go long on, it probably would be this, just because you've got really tight invalidation. If price starts to break back under this level and holds back inside the wedge, then I think we're probably going to see the macro uptrend break and price will go much, much lower over the next couple of years. But for now, that hasn't happened. This looks like support still, and a little cheeky long potentially back into this zone here with a TP here and a take profit at the upper boundary of this trend line here. That is potentially a decent risk return move, but given the state of the overall altcoin market, I am staying well away. I have covered in previous videos where I'm allocating my capital and how I'm doing that in a way that hopefully gives me, as much exposure to the AI boom as I can get in a very risk sensible way. Right now, the altcoin market doesn't feature and isn't on my radar, and it probably won't be in a proper systematic way until 2027. So I hope some of that has been useful. Just to recap, some of these alts look absolutely dreadful. We are seeing big back tests of the major alt cap coins versus BTC, such as Avax and Solana. And at the moment, I see nothing but a series of lower lows and lower highs for the altcoin market. So nothing to be super bullish about in the short term, in my view. I hope some of that was useful. If you are desperate to get into altcoins, that is completely on you and you make your own decisions. But for me, until we start to see a break of some of these big downtrends that have held all the way back to 2021, 2022, I just won't be touching this market because I think there's still so much risk attached to it. And with stablecoin dominance looking like it wants to break out at some point over the next couple of months, just for me, it's not an attractive market right now. And I expect we will get much, much lower prices on stuff like Solana and Avax and other altcoins in 2026, 2027. So hope some of that was entertaining, useful, informative. I know this video has probably lasted a bit longer than it should have today, but I wanted to give you a fairly comprehensive view on the altcoin market. And if you've enjoyed any of it, please do hit the subscribe button and like to help me grow the channel. Take care.